Tempe is a Catholic magazine founded by my father Luigi Amicone in Milan, Italy. I worked as a staff writer for its website between 2012 and 2014, becoming a freelance journalist. Then I dedicated myself to other editorial projects, trying to graduate in political science, a goal I would achieve in 2021, shortly before my father passed away. In 2017, my father still had his own column in Tempe. For a supervening fiscal reason, it wasn't convenient for him to be paid, so he sponsored my collaboration with the new chief editor Alessandro Giuli, future Minister of Culture, who accepted. In February, inspired by a strange dream, I presented to Tempe a proposal regarding the Monster of Florence case. I couldn't know yet, but it would be the beginning of a journalistic investigation that was going to be my daily job for almost 8 years. In the spring and summer of 2017, I frequently spent time in Tuscany for the monster case I had started to study a few months before. At the beginning of May, I visited Florence and the places of the crimes. Accompanied by attorney Edoardo Orlandi, I also went to visit a former French legionnaire, Giampiero Vigilante. It wasn't yet known to the public, but the Florence DA's office and Carabinieri were investigating him for alleged complicity in the monster murders. The case would be dismissed 3 years later. When in front of the gate of his lawn house we asked Vigilante what he thought on the monster's crimes and the conviction of the snack buddies, he replied laconically,
"There are other minds behind that."
My main interlocutor, whom I hadn't yet met at the time, was Joe Bevilacqua. Deductions based on certain clues made me believe that he might be the Californian serial killer Zodiac who could have moved to Florence in the 70s. At the time of the monster's activity, the U.S. witness of the Pacciani trial worked with the American Battle Monuments Commission, a federal agency that manages the military cemetery complexes of the First and Second World Wars, on the U.S. soil and abroad.
Vedete che Clinton prende una bandierina e poi la risistema. Un gesto semplice ma simbolico.
A FOIA response by the ABMC to a request from me would confirm that Bevilacqua arrived in Florence 5 months after last Zodiac's definite letter, and that he served at the local American cemetery until December 1988, before moving to Nettuno, as he declared at the Pacciani trial. ABMC would tell me that they don't have their annual reports of the 80s. In 2017, only some previous reports were digitized by Google. To get them, I'd have to ask the National Archives and various universities, receiving an almost unobtainable extract from the Oklahoma Library Department. The annual reports contain details on the employees, the works, and the important visits regarding the Florence American Cemetery, of which Bevilacqua became superintendent in 1977. They certify his presence in Florence during the monster period of activity, year after year, from July 1974 to the end of the murders. While examining these reports, an amatorial sleuth, Revelix, would notice a possible connection with the monster case that might have probative value. The use of Nubex silicone to waterproof marble at the Florence American Cemetery. On the shell casings from the last monster's crime at Via Scopiti, near Bevilacqua's place of work and residence, a whitish substance that would have been already present before the shots was observed by expert Giovanni Idavito in '85. The material analyzed only visually at the time turned out to be a mix of silicone, plaster, and zinc. Could the latter two substances have stuck to a Nubex residue from the American cemetery? The enterprise that produced the compound, the British Newbold, has been closed for decades. In 2019, I'd go to England, to the National Archives, to verify if there was any useful information in the Ministry of Technology dossier on Nubex and the similar Nubindex, obtaining confirmation that they were the commercial names of the Newbold product for waterproofing stone artifacts, which weren't mentioned in the patent description. I'd provide this information to the Florence DA's office in 2020, attaching it to a report on the hypothetical misdirection of the Sina case, but it would be overlooked. Analyzing the medals pinned to Bevilacqua's ABMC superintendent uniform, I learned that he had a long career in the Army. I sent him a message that was an allusion to his dark past, in case he was Zodiac. I told Bevilacqua that I was working on the biography of a soldier who may have served in the military police in California at the time of the Vietnam War. It was the same period of the certain and possible activity of Zodiac in that state. The actual serial killer, who was probably living with the fear of being caught sooner or later, would be undoubtedly scared. Although it was Bevilacqua who invited me to see each other in person, the first time I rang the intercom of the apartment where he lived, the octogenarian veteran looked out of the balcony and with an anguished tone of voice asked me 3 times why I had come to visit him. After a moment of uncertainty, he opened the gate. To get to know him better, I didn't immediately address the subject of my investigation. Most of the interviews took place in person in Bevilacqua's apartment in Sesto Fiorentino, with his bulldog, Ophi, dozing next to us. The first time, at the entrance to the apartment, I was surprised by a cardboard silhouette of Jesus at eye level, in contrast with the figurine in the center of the table to which the guests lead me, depicting a bull with an almost naked woman tied on its back, which probably featured a scene from Quo Vadis. Bevilacqua wasn't religious, while his wife Mary Torelli present herself as an observant Catholic. Also for this reason I'd give them a book on the Rosary to Mary Untier of Knots, protector of couples, and to Bevilacqua an essay by English writer Gilbert Keith Chesterton, known to the public above all for the detective stories of Father Brown. Shortly before dealing with the monster case, on Christmas Eve 2016, I bought a novel that mocked a failed attempt to canonize Chesterton by the Catholic Church. Inside there was a prayer by Pope Francis asking for his intercession. I memorized that prayer, saying it often at the beginning of the investigation. Once, Bevilacqua and I talked outside his apartment, at an outdoor table of a bar in Falciani, close to the American cemetery where he lived during the monster's activity, near numerous crime scenes. And in the car during the journey between the cemetery and his last home. In the first meetings, Bevilacqua talked to me about his war experience in Vietnam and as a detective with the Army's Criminal Investigation Detachments. It transpired from Bevilacqua's attitude that he understood the reason why I wanted to meet him, although it remained implicit at first. After the second meeting in May, he walked me on the doorstep, and with a pat on the back he said,
"I like you, because you are one who doesn't bring trouble."
In 2018 I'd provide the judicial police a copy of most of the notes that I wrote down during those interviews. They report that Bevilacqua served in the 5th CI Detachment in Livorno between 64 and 65. This and other pieces of information, which weren't known to the public at the time, would be later confirmed by government documents I'd obtained from the National Personnel Records Center of St. Louis. After forwarding those documents to the detectives in charge of the monster and the Zodiac cases, I translate them in Italian, letting the public know about Bevilacqua's military background on my blog Ostello Volante. In the article on Bevilacqua's bio you can consult his military dossier and the ABMC records relating to his stay in Florence, both acquired during my investigation. In his testimony at the Pacciani trial, Bevilacqua hadn't given precise indications about his past, remaining vague.
Da quanti anni lei è in Italia?
26 anni.
Oh, quindi anche nel 68 c'era in Italia?
Sì.
Bene. Senta, e dove stava in Italia nel
78?
Ah.
Cimitero americano.
Cimitero? 70, non lo so, io ho detto 68, l'ho buttato lì.
Allora, lei sta... chiediamo forse a capire...
Quanti anni è che è in Italia lei?
Io, quando è arrivato il primo, 1964.
64. 6?
6-4, ma io sono andato via d'Italia per lavoro, 3 o 4 lavori.
Oh beh, 64 lei è stato in Italia.
Sì.
E in Toscana quante volte c'è stato?
In tutto forse 22-23 anni.
Bene.
Bevilacqua's behavior seemed to me too cautious for a mythomaniac or a suggested witness, as he has been defined by some people interested in the monster case. After the closing arguments of Pacciani's attorneys, Prosecutor Canessa called the U.S. Embassy in Rome, being informed that the role of superintendent of a monumental war cemetery was prestigious, and that Bevilacqua had many military awards. Before meeting the American witness, I came across some photos of him with high U.S. public officials, including the then-President George Bush Sr. and the House Speaker Newt Gingrich. The military decorations Bevilacqua exhibits in this photo are all authentic. It is proven by the list that the St. Louis Records Center would send me. In his 20-year career in the Army, Bevilacqua was conferred the badge of the Combat Infantry Badge, the Air Medal, awards for his service and for having fought in the Vietnam War, as well as several medals for valor. A Silver Star, the third highest U.S. award bestowed for actions of gallantry in combat. 2 Bronze Stars, for bravery in combat too. A Soldier's Medal, decoration for valor in a situation of non-conflict. Bevilacqua earned also a Purple Heart for a wound on the battlefield. Just one of these medals is enough to be considered a fearless soldier, but it is the motivation of the Silver Star that makes Bevilacqua's qualities better understood.
Department of the Army, Headquarters, 25th Infantry Division. May 4, 1968. Award of the Silver Star. Bevilacqua Joseph, Sergeant First Class. Reason: for heroism in connection with military operations against a hostile force. Sergeant First Class Bevilacqua distinguished himself by heroic actions on March 9, 1968, while serving as a platoon sergeant with Company B, 1st Battalion 27th Infantry Regiment, on a combat operation in the Republic of Vietnam. When his platoon came under intense small arms, automatic weapons, and RPG rocket fire from 3 sides, Sergeant Bevilacqua immediately reacted by maneuvering a squad into position to lay down a base of fire. When the platoon began to withdraw to allow for airstrikes on the enemy positions, 1 man was critically wounded and pinned down by hostile fire. Sergeant Bevilacqua noticed the man being left behind and, with complete disregard for his own safety, crawled approximately 60 meters through intense enemy fire to bring the wounded man back to safety. Finding it impossible to carry the man through the withering fire, he tied his rifle sling around the man's legs and pulled him a distance of approximately 80 meters to safety. Sergeant Bevilacqua's personal bravery, aggressiveness, and devotion to duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, the 25th Infantry Division, and the United States Army.
In the 2017 notes read by the Carabinieri, I also report the personal details of a few Bevilacqua's comrades. On the 12th page, for example, the name of Frank Chiusano is mentioned. His past, and that of other CID investigators, would be confirmed by subsequent FOIA responses from the U.S. National Archives. Chiusano was actually assigned to the 5th CID in Livorno in the period in which Bevilacqua served there. The names of Robert Colombo and Raymond Diderio recur more times in my notes. Colombo was the chief of Bevilacqua and Chiusano's unit in Livorno in the mid-1960s. His father was called Joe and, according to a family legend that Bevilacqua cited to me, he would have inspired the figure of the famous and almost homonymous lieutenant. Colombo's military records, in addition to prove what Bevilacqua revealed to me, report that, a year after his honorable discharge and moving to Florence, his former boss returned to Tuscany and stayed in Livorno from 75 to 79, during the first phase of apparent inactivity of the monster recognized by the Italian justice. Sending me this group photo, retired CID agent Louise Head would tell me that in '68 Colombo and Diderio were part of the security detail of General Creighton Abrams, commander of the American troops in Vietnam at the time. Like Colombo, in '69 Diderio was assigned to the 12th CID group in New York. The group's headquarters were at Fort Meade in Maryland. During the interviews, Bevilacqua told me about the attempt to enlist in the Marine Corps in '53, talking to me about the training on Parris Island, and the fact that he was sent back because he was a minor. I'd find a match on a Marine's muster roll on the Ancestry website. Bevilacqua told me he joined the Army in 1954, being transferred to the Castle Barracks of Butzbach in West Germany soon after. He would have remained in German territory until '57, switching to an armored unit patrolling the Fulda Gap along the Iron Curtain. A photo of Butzbach Castle from the mid-1950s, showing the insignia of the 8th Regiment, and a search on newspapers.com, confirm Bevilacqua's information in the notes. The first item on the list of assignments reports his attempt to join the Marine Corps. A few years after the interviews, an amateur sleuth, Francesco Del Ponte, would found a short autobiography of Bevilacqua in a book of the 25th Infantry Division. Here, speaking of himself in the third person, the Italian-American falsely claims to have been in the Marines for 3 years, and tells an anecdote about Vietnam.
His memorable experiences include the battle at Hawk Mon Woods. After a human wave attack, though, second attempt turned out to be wild pigs. First good meal in weeks. 25th had many good Hawaiians who barbecued real well.
The line related to the transfer to Butzbach proves that the list also contains some inaccuracies. It's very unlikely that a recruit could be a squad leader, although this assignment was also mentioned by the local press in New Jersey in '54. In addition, the word USA is 4 letters short of the correct acronym for U.S. Army Europe. The following lines show the transfer to the 14th Cavalry Regiment that guarded the border with East Germany. Bevilacqua told me that he worked as a cook, a secondary job he had to carry out besides the patrol activity. On the page of my notes with the first reference to Butzbach, I write that Bevilacqua said he had participated in a selection and completed an 8-week preparation in Alabama with the Chemical Corps, becoming a CBR instructor. The list confirms Bevilacqua's stay in Fort McClellan, the historic headquarters of the Chemical Corps, specifying that he was CBR assistant and instructor in New Jersey and New York states for about 4 years, before being transferred to Livorno, and that at the end of the first decade of his military career, in '64, he joined 5th CI Detachment of the Military Police. According to official data, Bevilacqua came back to homeland in August '66. The previous year his first child was born from the union with an Italian woman. Bevilacqua told me he had been a CID investigator for 10 years, until his dismissal at Camp Darby in June '74. He worked with the CID even while he was in the 27th Infantry Regiment in Vietnam, where he had gone as a volunteer. Similarly, in '69, he would have been with a CID unit from the East Coast. Meanwhile, he was serving in the Continental Army Command Organization. He told me that I'd not find any of those assignments in his military records, because he worked undercover and therefore had to remain secret. There is no mention of the military police in Bevilacqua's OMPF since the assignation of '66. But it's almost evident that starting from then his assignments become incongruent. After doing a couple of years as an assistant CID investigator, the former CBR instructor would have turned into a mess and club steward. Later, he continued in the infantry, becoming an operations and intelligence sergeant, first in Vietnam, then in 2 key commands in Virginia and Germany. Finally, he ended his career at Camp Derby in the logistics sector, with very vague job descriptions. A user of the ZodiacKiller.com forum, a retired soldier, would speculate on a possible adulteration of the list of Bevilacqua's assignations, accusing me of that. It would be enough to request his records to the National Personnel Records Center to ascertain that I am not responsible. In any case, in January 2019, I'd get a confirmation on the Italian-American's undercover investigative activities from Lieutenant Colonel Mark Reese, commanding officer of Bevilacqua's infantry battalion in Vietnam between September and December 1968. Reese would tell me,
"When I assumed command of the 1st Wolfhounds in September 1968, SFC Bevilacqua was my operations sergeant. I considered him an outstanding soldier. Shortly after I assumed command, the division commander charged him with a special, undercover assignment. He was sent to the division NCO Academy to determine if illegal activities were being committed within that unit. It took him about a week to get the goods on several NCOs and, I believe, at least one officer, for dealing in drugs and prostitution. When he returned to my command, he had a very interesting story to tell."
Reese's email refers to the 25th Infantry Division. When Bevilacqua carried out that undercover activity, D'Addario was a detective in the same division. I'd suppose he was his supervisor. Indeed, I report the word chief in my notes. Before joining the Army, Bevilacqua's colleague was a detective of the Air Force, the OSI, until July 1967. While the OSI investigates the members of the Air Force and the NCIS known for the homonymous TV series those of the Navy, the CID units have investigative competence on the Army soldiers, as it could be known because of the protagonist of Lee Child's novels, Jack Reacher, who also worked with the CID. In all cases, these investigations concern a restricted military environment. It's therefore not surprising that detectives with undercover assignments may come from bases different from those where they do their job. I found an example of that in news about an anti-drug operation in Camp Derby in '71, which involved Italian investigators and the local CID. The article tells of an officer moved from Germany to infiltrate the group of suspects disguised as a hippie. The undercover detective might be just Bevilacqua, if it was false the description of his appearance given to the press, of a blonde and slouchy man. Indeed, he was apparently assigned from the 7th Army Command in Germany to Camp Darby in the same period. On June 30, 2017, I agreed with Bevilacqua to write his biography. I'd not keep a copy of the pro forma, and it's not clear from this image, but there was an underline in the circle of the Q of his signature, missing in the others that I'd have the opportunity to see. That day the elderly host brought me a photo album from the 60s and 70s. I thought it was one of those I had already leafed through, and I was stunned for a moment when I saw a Celtic cross drawn in pencil on the title page. It was the symbol used by Zodiac to sign himself. But we have not yet spoken openly about that case.
Anch'io sono umani come voi.
A skin diver's watch? The only time I'm underwater is in the shower. Zodiac watches.
Zodiac, a symbol that now stands for terror in San Francisco. Today there was a possibly significant development in the terrifying case of the man who calls himself Zodiac and has boasted that he is responsible for 5 murders in the last 9 months. In Zodiac's latest letter last week, he threatened to make a busload of school children his next victims. Since then, school buses have been discreetly guarded.
The new letters from the Zodiac Killer were sent to the city room of the San Francisco Chronicle. One of the letters was 7 pictures
Living.
long, and in it,
No living.
Have you considered the water theory?
What?
Geographically, every attack takes place near a body of water
What's
or
your water
water-based
theory?
name. Lake Berryessa, Blue Rock Springs, Lake Herman.
Washington and Cherry?
Another grim message. I've killed 7, the Zodiac claims.
Sorry I haven't written, but I just washed my pen.
And in July 1969, an anonymous writer sent almost identical letters to 3 newspapers in the San Francisco Bay Area, claiming responsibility for 2 deadly shootings north of the bay. The victims were young couples in their cars secluded in the surroundings of Vallejo. 2 teenagers, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, had been killed in a lay-by on Lake Herman Road on the evening of December 20, 1968. Solano County Sheriff's officers headed by Detective Leslie Lundblad hadn't found yet a motive, despite months of investigation. The next couple, Michael Mageau and Darlene Farron, were attacked in front of the Blue Rock Springs golf course on the night of July 4th. Only Michael survived. Immediately afterwards, a man called the Vallejo police claiming to be the perpetrator, as well as the individual responsible for the previous double murder of 68. Police traced the call to a phone booth at Joe's Union gas station. Detective Ed Rust interviewed Michael. The boy declared that they had been attacked by a stocky young man, about 5 feet and 8 inches high. The attacker parked behind their car on the driver's side, where Darlene was sit. He drove away, then returned and parked on the other side. The attacker got out of his car and dazzled them with a flashlight. Michael and Darlene thought it was a policeman. They were looking for their IDs when he began shooting. The man had a stocky build, light brown hair and wore a blue t-shirt. Mageau didn't remember any distinctive features, except that he had a large face. It was 4 weeks later when the killer sent his first letters. They were addressed to the editors of the Vallejo Times-Herald, the Examiner, and the San Francisco Chronicle. The notes were all accompanied by a different part of a cipher. The author demanded their publication, otherwise he'd kill again. He didn't sign with a name but a symbol, a Celtic cross. In the letter to the Chronicle, he said that he had included his identity in his cipher, which would be decrypted a few days later by 2 teachers from Salinas, the spouses Betty and Donald Harden. The text reads,
I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest. Because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It's even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collection of slaves for my afterlife. Ebiariot met H.H. Pity.
The last part seems to make no sense. It might be an anagram. In the plaintext there are a few misspellings, like paradise with a C instead of S. Paradise with C is an obsolete archaic term. Could it be a play on words with dice? Or maybe ice? A report prepared by DOJ agent Mel Nikolai of the California Bureau of Investigation reports that the attackers' belief in an afterlife where victims would become slaves of their killers could originate in Southeast Asia. There are similar superstitions in other areas of the world as well. A user of the forum of ZodiacKiller.com, Mike D., would find a resembling belief in the saga of Kull of Volusia by Robert Howard. In the short story The Ghost Kingdom, the exiled warrior of Atlantis finds himself facing the snake men, who enslave the souls of those they kill. There may be another hidden quote in the phrase, "Man is the most dangerous animal." Italian researcher Daniele Trinchieri would find an almost identical sentence in an installation at the New York Zoo in '63, revived in Chicago 2 years later, a simple mirror bearing the inscription, "The most dangerous animal in the world." An analogous epithet, reported by various amatorial sleuths, is featured in a movie of the 30s derived from a story by Richard Connell, The Most Dangerous Game. The main characters are two young people shipwrecked on an island owned by a Russian count, Zarov, a big game hunter, who behind his kind manner would prove to be anything but hospitable.
What I needed was not a new weapon, but a new animal.
A new animal?
Exactly so.
You found one?
Yes. Here on my island, I hunt the most dangerous game.
The most dangerous game? You mean tigers?
In a letter of August 1969, the anonymous writer made himself known by the name of Zodiac. Speaking to the Examiner about the couple of teenagers killed in '68, he concluded this way.
All I had to do was spray them as if it was a water hose. There was no need to use the gun sights. I was not happy to see that I did not get front page coverage.
On September 27th, before sunset, Zodiac was at Lake Berryessa, threatening two college students, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, with a gun. He wore a black hood with an embroidered Celtic cross at the height of his chest, clip-on glasses with dark lenses, and military boots. He pretended to be a robber escaping from a prison. He asked for car keys and money that he didn't take. Once the victims were lying down, tied with washing line ropes, Zodiac unsheathed a bayonet, hitting the boy with a few stabs and then attacking the girl. Before leaving, he wrote a message with a marker on the door of the victim's car. Brian's description differed from the previous one only in the color of assailant's hair. He spotted a dark brown tuft between the perpetrator's glasses and his hood.
He was of medium to short height, kind of pouchy.
I considered him a robber. I had absolutely no thought that he was anything but that. And when we were at this robbery stage, I didn't consider any real threat to my life or to the girl or anything. I really didn't consider this, but I really wanted to help him. And
did he seem as though he would like your help at all?
No, he didn't, and he didn't even end up taking the money.
7:40 p.m., Officer Slate at the Napa Police Department received this call, and the subject stated, I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. They are about 2 miles above park headquarters in Lake Berryessa, and they are driving a Volkswagen Karmann Ghia. And with that, the officer asked, well, where are you now? And he stated, I did it. And with that, the officer could feel that there was nobody on the line. He said, are you there, and there was no answer.
The phone booth where the call was made was located between the Napa car wash and the local laundry. Brian survived the attack, while Cecilia died 2 days later. On October 11th, Zodiac killed a cab driver, Paul Stine, on Washington Street in San Francisco. He stole his wallet and car keys, and the police mistook him for a robber. According to a reconstruction by the detectives, the killer hailed the cab driven by Stine near the Geary Theater, where the famous hippie musical Hair was staging, and then headed towards the Presidio area. A few days later, a note from Zodiac arrived at the Chronicle. It was accompanied by a shred of Stine's bloody shirt. The serial killer threatened to make a school bus his next target.
Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out.
In a November letter, Zodiac claimed to have been stopped by a patrol car immediately after the crime and to have misled the police officers. Agent Donald Falk partially confirmed this story in a memorandum, stating that he saw the suspect, but he didn't approach him because the dispatch had said he was black.
You could say he sort of looked down, perhaps this lumbering gait, sort of stumbling along like a semi-limp, might have come up in my mind because he was putting his head down when he spotted the police car and turned into the entranceway of a house.
In the following days, the police released a sketch based on the testimony of 3 teenagers. They described to Agent Armand Pellicetti a stocky man in his 40s, about 5 feet and 8 inches tall, wearing thick-rimmed glasses. The only contradiction with the other testimonies, again, was the color of his hair. It was reddish this time. In the letter in which Zodiac talks about the close encounter with the police patrol, he writes he disguised himself. I think I figured out how, by consulting local newspapers from '69 and coming across a movie screened in San Francisco in October. The film was Take the Money and Run by Woody Allen, which tells the story of a clumsy robber, Virgil Starkwell, born in New Jersey in December 1935.
It's ACT, A-C-T, ACT natural. Please put $50,000 into this bag. ACT natural. It's not...
Oh, I see. This is a holdup.
Yes.
All right, Warden, I got your daughter.
Wait! Hold your fire, man!
Let me go or she gets it!
Taxi, please.
First one in line's next.
In his memorandum, Agent Falk states that the suspect was wearing a navy blue windbreaker and brown pants, a suit identical to the one worn by Virgil Starkwell in various scenes of Allen's film, including the one shot in San Francisco when he runs into his future wife.
What do you do?
I'm a laundress.
Laundress? Laundry?
Yeah, I wash clothes.
In a letter from 70 containing his encrypted name, Zodiac writes cryptically,
I was swamped out by the rain we had a while back.
Vowing that he will never serve his full term, Virgil plans an elaborate escape using a bar of soap and some shoe polish.
How do you manage to spend your time in prison? Do you have any hobbies or anything?
I do. I've been working on, I've been doing a lot of stuff in shop, actually, and I'm very skilled with my hands. You know if it's raining out?
Take the Money and Run was premiered in August '69 in New York and then in Los Angeles. From October 8th, it was scheduled at the Bridge in San Francisco, a cinema along the direct route from the Gary Theater to the crime scene on Washington Street. A few steps from the Bridge, housed in a girls' Catholic school, there was the Presentation Theater where the Lamplighters performed. The company is still famous in the city for staging the works of the duo Gilbert and Sullivan. A week after the murder of Stine, at the Presentation Theater, the Lamplighters brought on stage the Mikado, an operetta that Zodiac would quote in 2 letters. In November, the serial killer sent a postcard with another cipher attached. Half a century later, it will be decrypted by 3 researchers, David Oranchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck. The word paradise with a C is present in this cipher too, being reported also backwards like other words. Paradise would appear again in a letter of 70 listing the tortures that Zodiac said he wanted to inflict on his victims in the afterlife, then, in a Halloween greetings card mailed to the Chronicle reporter Paul Avery. In June 2022, using Paradise as a key, I'd believe that I discovered the solution of the possible anagram at the end of Zodiac's first cipher. The decryption was obtained following the method of columnar transposition. The author of the message stopped at an intermediate step, simplifying it. The first part of the solution is backwards, and 2 words are in Italian, the verb to drink in the infinitive form and e, that is, and. Once corrected, the translation says,
I drink and tope, I'm the hit.
Hit could refer to baseball terminology, allude to Zodiac's fame, or to something else, a song for example. A hit that was popular in the summer of '69. In the sentence that precedes the anagram, Zodiac states that he does not want to give his name, apparently denying what he said to the Chronicle. Perhaps the solution of this riddle can be a clue to the serial killer's identity? I'd find out that near the phone booth from which Zodiac called the Napa police after the attack on Lake Berryessa, there was a theater where Woody Allen's Don't Drink the Water was about to be performed. Robert Graysmith, a Chronicle cartoonist at the time of Zodiac and author of a homonymous bestseller published in '86, highlights that water is a recurring element in the Zodiac case. Preceded by similar observations by psychiatrist Leonti Thompson and researcher Gareth Penn, Graysmith points out in his book that references to water are contained in the name of each definite crime scene. Graysmith includes among them Zodiac's last murder in San Francisco, on Washington Street, which could allude to the verb wash. In the attack on Lake Berryessa, there are other references to wash, as well as in the postcard mailed a month and a half later. And maybe also on the envelope containing the Halloween card of the following year, where Zodiac underlines lav, the first letters of the Italian verb lavare, to wash. Perhaps Zodiac was a sailor, swimmer, or boatman, says Graysmith. Or maybe a former Navy member, like the most notorious suspect in the case to date, Arthur Lee Allen. The name of this teacher from Santa Rosa, a city north of the San Francisco Bay Area, would be discarded by detectives for lack of evidence, like that of many other suspects. The investigation into him, though, would disclose the probable source of inspiration for the serial killer's name, the watch producer Zodiac, whose symbol is a Celtic cross. Also in this case there is a reference to water. Indeed, the flagship product by Zodiac watches at the end of the '60s was the Sea Wolf. Since the '50s, the ads of the Sea Wolf were focused on its waterproof skill, as can be noticed in this '67 ad that was featured in several U.S. newspapers, Californian too. The list of Zodiac's allusions to water does not end here but extends to many of the serial killer's notes. One can also be found in a letter of December '69 addressed to attorney Melvin Bell-Lai.
Please help me, I'm drowning.
It's not the only recurring element found in this letter, in which Zodiac seems to have copied the font of the license plate of Bell-Lai's house number. The note arrived while the attorney was in Europe. It was accompanied by another piece of Stine's bloody shirt. Misspelling errors appear in it, such as Mary with one R and difficult with one F. 16 years later, there would be the same type of error in Italian, followed by an hyphen, on the envelope mailed by the so-called monster of Florence. An amatorial sleuth of the Zodiac case, Shine V, would also notice a possible cinematic allusion on the same theme as the dangerous game.
I am afraid I will lose control again and take my ninth and possibly 10th victim.
Così l'assassinio fu legalizzato, su basi strettamente individuali, e solo per coloro che lo richiedevano. Vittime e cacciatori. Fu così che nacque l'istituto della grande caccia. La guerra era tornata là dove era nata, nelle mani degli individui. e per ogni individuo il traguardo più ambito era la 10ª vittima.
Taunting law enforcement officers is a hallmark of Zodiac's modus operandi. FBI agent Larry Ankrum believes it's one of the reasons that push him to continue killing. In January 1970, an FBI telegram reports a phone call to Belai's home from a self-proclaimed Zodiac, who told the attorneys May that it was his birthday. The FBI telegram does not specify when the call was received, but it should date back 2 weeks before, at the end of December. I'd find out that on December 29th, the San Francisco police gave the FBI a list of suspects with same or similar birth dates, which are currently redacted in the available records. In October 1969, a pretended Zodiac had made phone calls to ABC Channel 7 to talk with Belai, while he was a guest on Jim Dunbar's talk show. In the plaintext of the November cipher, the serial killer said it wasn't him. However, 1 month and a half later he actually contacted the attorney. Who was the author of the birthday call then, the imposter or the murderer? Perhaps the police already know the answer. According to San Francisco detectives Dave Toschi and Bill Armstrong, Zodiac had a military background. Some facts seem to support this lead, such as the bayonet and the boots he used in the Lake Berryessa attack, as well as the ciphers. For the Army Security Agency and the CID at the Presidio, Zodiac was probably trained in cryptography by the U.S. military. However, his possible competence regarding ciphers seems to be inconsistent with the brevity of the last ones. They are so short that they couldn't be solved without hints. The first of them is Zodiac's name encoded with 13 symbols. It was mailed to the Chronicle on April 20th, 1970, 4 months after the Belai letter. There are so few symbols that it's impossible to determine what the solution might be with a standard method. Zodiac apparently gives no clue in this 2-page note where he makes spelling mistakes more strange than usual, such as Cirrus instead of Curious, and Sid instead of Kid. On the second page, there is a diagram of a bomb with which the author of the message threatens to blow up a school bus. He is keen to specify that an automatic mechanism would prevent it from going off by acid. This letter, in addition to the reference to the soap gun scene in Take the Money and Run, contains a second cinematic allusion, and indirectly to water. The serial killer claims not to be responsible for a bomb that caused the death of a Blue Meanie, referring to a policeman. The Blue Meanies are villains in a Beatles movie based on one of their most famous songs.
We all live in the yellow submarine.
The Yellow Submarine.
Yellow submarine.
The forces of good, the Beatles. The arch-villain, the Blue Meanie.
Just a couple of months before the Chronicle published Zodiac's name cipher, the New York Times reported that Blue Meanies had been used during the student protests at Berkeley as a nickname for the Alameda County Sheriff's deputies. This is confirmed by a protest sign in the sheriff's archive. And it was precisely an area in front of the Eden Township substation of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, the target of the bomb indicated by my solution of last known Zodiac cipher, the Mont Diablo code. The letter with this cipher was sent in June, 2 months after Zodiac's encrypted name, and a subsequent postcard depicting Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. Enclosed with the letter was a map. The note explains that the cipher together with the map allows you to pinpoint the spot where a bomb would have been placed. The target is no longer a school bus because schools are closed. In a July letter, Zodiac would say that the cipher contains radians and inches, that are measurements of distance and angle. On the map there is a compass with the center on the top of Mont Diablo. Zodiac asks that the needle be pointed toward magnetic north. This type of information, angle, distance, and position of magnetic north are necessary to navigate with a compass and a map along a certain direction to reach some place. This seems to imply that the cipher contains not only the location of the bomb but the route to reach it, with a distance and an azimuth based on magnetic north. The units of measurement used to navigate aren't radians and inches, but degrees and miles or kilometers. Even the FBI, which couldn't solve the cipher, believes that the word miles might be present. Despite the suggestion, the cipher is still too short and with few repetitions to be solved. Perhaps there is more? In 2018, observing that the compass needle is shaped like an arrow, I'd ask myself if the distance could be the sum of the segments that divide the quadrants of the compass. By rotating the final arrow, you'll have a perimeter along which the bomb could be positioned, about 14 miles from the top of Mont Diablo, according to the map scale, which is off by 2 miles. This trick drastically reduces the number of possible solutions. By searching along the highlighted perimeter, you'll come across the area of the intersection of Foothill Boulevard and Hillcrest Knolls. Checking it out on Google Maps, I'd noticed the presence of the Eden Township Station of the Alameda County Sheriff, whose deputies were nicknamed Blue Meanies, in the same way Zodiac called the police officer killed by a bomb in his previous letter of April 20th. I'd believe I found the correct decryption after trying various options. In the solution I propose, after the name of the places Foothill Boulevard and Hillcrest, you can read the distance from Mont Diablo, which according to the scale of the map is about 14 miles. Other than the consistency of the repeated symbols, there are 2 identical replacements for each of the previous ciphers of 69. There is the word far instead of away, a gross error like many others in Zodiac notes. Next comes the azimuth, the angle between magnetic north and the direction to follow from the top of Mont Diablo to reach the target area. The figure of 570 degrees is deliberately excessive. 210 degrees would have been enough, but it seems that Zodiac added a 360-degree turn. Indeed, if you compare the alphabetic letters that replace 3 of the numbers in the decryption, you'll find out that they have been transposed following a precise order. It is likely that the serial killer wanted to mock the police. You can verify the result on my blog Ostello Volante. In order to do so, you need software that measures angles. The first step is to direct the compass towards magnetic north, that is 17 degrees in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1970. It should be noted that Zodiac's compass is tilted towards the east. If you want to use a perpendicular line instead of the original indicator, you'll need to tilt it by 2 degrees before starting. The second step is to rotate until you get the angle to follow to reach the identified area, which as mentioned is a complete turn plus 210 degrees. After aligning the segments of the quadrants, you'll get the final arrow that indicates precisely the target area. The solution is logical even if it doesn't follow a standard decryption. The mystery remains as to what Zodiac really placed in that area of San Leandro. Was it just a bluff, or did he really hide something in front of the Eden Township Station? This is the last known cipher sent by Zodiac, but not the end of his enigmas.